Hey, 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 yeah, hey, what a time to be alive. I left them for dead, now I'm living right. No new friends, no new advice. That was high then, but we got bigger heights. We got bigger fish to fry. Bet on myself, then I roll the dice. Man, it ain't a gamble if you know you nice.
All right, welcome back to Dawn of Dream Podcast. I'm your host, Ara Amos, the #1 podcast in Dallas, and I have a very, very special guest in here in the building today, Mike Alexander, a.k.a. Blackbelt Mike, a.k.a. author, business owner. I can go on and on.
Yeah, you can add actor in there and all kinds of other stuff. I try to stay busy.
Yeah. I want to first start by saying you wrote the book, Improve Your Position. Mm-hmm. Phenomenal story. We connected at a Fury Fighting event maybe a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago.
Yeah.
And I was sitting with a young lady, and she introduced me to you, and she says, you have to meet Mike. He has a phenomenal story.
Yeah.
And I hear people say they have great stories all the time, right?
Yeah.
And I read your book. I listened to it. I actually got the physical copy as well. And I'm listening to it, and I love that you narrate it. Like, props to you on that.
Yeah, something else I had to be talked into because I was not crazy about going and sitting in a studio for 10 hours. I don't think people understand how much time that takes. It takes a lot of time to do an audiobook.
Yeah. But as I'm listening to it, I feel like it gets crazier and crazier and crazier. And you're at any moment, you could just play the victim card. And you had every opportunity, and you have excuses, and you just did the complete opposite. You used that and said, no, I'm not going to be a victim. I'm still going to make sure that I get this shit done. I go make sure my dreams come true. And I loved it. Like, I love that just breaking of the victim mentality, even though you had ways out.
Yeah, and that wasn't always the case. You know, there was times in my life when I was a little younger that I wasn't really vocal about it. But in my head, I was like, these things are for someone else because I've just, I had kind of a crazy life and I had a terrible childhood and, just good things aren't supposed to come to people that have those things. These are handicaps that people just don't get over. And so, that's the mentality I had, and that's what I told myself over and over and over. And so I was way more scared of success when I was younger because of those things than I was of failure. Failure was normal. So, it was success. Like, what are the people that I'm around, even my dad, what is he going to think if I pull up in a Bentley or something like that? What's he going to think? And I found out, my very first, I was 23 years old. I got a huge commission check for me then, which was like $20-something thousand, and that I made in a month, and bought a Corvette, bought a 1976 Corvette Stingray that was all original, and it was beautiful. It was immaculate. And so I was kind of a little afraid to buy too new of a Corvette, but I wanted a classic Corvette and, the T-tops and all that stuff. And plus, it was one of my dad's cars that he really liked. So I thought, okay, well, maybe this one he won't hate that I bought it. Maybe he'll like it too. And so I pulled up in it. My dad happened to be working on his house the day that, I pulled up in it, and I was like, hey, look what I bought. And he kind of came around and he's like, where did you get this? And you could tell immediately, like, he was like pissed that, he had, without saying it, he is like, I've worked my entire life and I can't afford a car like this. And here you are, 23-year-old punk, basically. You're partying your money away, and you're, if you didn't do what he did, he thought you didn't do anything. And so that was kind of his mentality the whole time. And, it took him 5 or 6 months to warm up to it before he would even go for a ride in it. And so he just hated that. He hated it. He hated that I had it. He hated that I made the money to have it. And so, being around that mentality your whole life, while I have a lot of wealthy friends who grew up wealthy, and when their parents were teaching them financial literacy, and, kind of how to run businesses and why they do this or that. My dad's teaching me, learn a trade, get up early, work until it's dark, and then come home, just make sure your bills are paid. And so, I was way more scared of success than I was failure because, failure was easy. I could get rid of this car. I could spend all the money and, and not be able to afford to put gas in it, but I would have it. And so that's cool. But, failure was just normal, and it was normal in our family. So I just thought that's what I was destined for.
Wow. Unpack that. And you kind of talked about in the book your childhood with your relationship with your father. Maybe give a little synopsis for the audience.
Yeah, so my dad was I'm the son of a bricklayer, and so he was really tough, and he was really, kind of really rough around the edges. And for whatever reason, we never really talked about it because my dad wasn't one of those guys you could just challenge. As I got older and older and older, I did challenge him more, and that's why our relationship was always very tumultuous. But he's just not one of those guys you could challenge regularly because your life would be miserable for the next few hours or however long you had to be around him to if you did. And so, but he just, if you were rich or if you were wealthy or if you had more than he did, basically, you had done something crooked, you had stole something, you were a thief, you were something, and it just, at the time I didn't realize why it aggravated me so much, and it was. But even as a young guy at 8 years old, the first year I was around my dad, I was like, I don't want to be like this. And so, an 8-year-old telling your dad, he's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, whatever you are, I don't want to be that because I want more than this. And then he's like, oh, you think you're better than this? You think you're. So me and my dad had that type of relationship all the way until I was 30. And so, it was just, if I did well in something, he kind of put it down, and then if I was doing well in other things, he wouldn't want me around. And so, and he felt the way about me just from the little bit of success that I had when I was younger. He didn't want me around either. And so just because I had more than him and I wanted more than him, so he thought I was looking down on him like he thought all those other people did. The funny part about that was the wealthiest people my dad knew were the ones that helped him all the time. And so he's like, hey, I'd like to buy a boat for my family. And the wealthiest guy he knew, a guy named Bud Bartley, who was a builder in Louisville and Flower Mound area, just loaned him the money to buy his boat. And, of course he paid it back. But, it was just those kind of things. These people just stepped up and helped him. And he still, resented them and, to their face, he was nice, of course, but to us at home, he was like, "Don't be like them," and I just never understood it. And so, we always had those. We always butted heads about that. About why do you hate this person so much? And he was like, "Well, he thinks he's better than us and all that." Well, what makes you say that? And he just never could answer it. And so I just thought, I kind of thought my dad was full of shit all the time. And so, I loved him, and I respected everything else about him except for that. I respected the things that he was, but the things that the ideas that he had were just they were off to me. So we never had a great relationship until he died in 2014. But the last 5 years of our relationship was really, really good, and we got really, really close. But it was because I made some decisions, and I talked about it in the book. I made some decisions. When I saw him again, he was ridden with cancer, and he was just, he was a shell of himself. And I still told him, if you don't support what I do, I'm never going to talk to you again. I'm just going to leave you behind. And the hard part about that was I needed him.
Yeah.
I need to live with you. I need to start over. I need to be able to come there. But if you say no because I'm telling you this, then I'm just going to deal with it some other way. If it's not with you, you're not willing to help me because I'm telling you this, I understand. But you're out of my life. And so I think that kind of flipped him too. And, so he still never really, you could still tell he was just like, how do you do this? But he never said anything else about it the rest of my life. And the first time my dad ever said he was proud of me was, probably 2 or 3 weeks before he died.
Wow.
So yeah, and it was because, now, my dad and I are having this conversation about, I think he knew he was going to die. And so he had been battling cancer for 7 years. And, he says, hey, come bring me one of those fancy cars and let's go for a ride. And I was like, oh, okay. So we did. And I was like, everything all right? And he was like, well, just, I got some stuff I want to tell you. And, so he told me some stuff about our family and about, stuff that I'd kind of heard jokes about, but I never thought it was serious. And so he told me some of this stuff. And then he told me about, hey, we're broke. and your mom's going to find out whenever I die. And so it was kind of one of those conversations. And then, I could just tell. I was like, this might be the last, big conversation I have with my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just told him, I was like, no matter what, I don't care what it is, what do you want to do? Is there anything you want to see in person? I don't care what it is. Anywhere in the world, we don't even have to go home. We don't have to pack. I'll buy everything we need wherever we're going. You want to get it? I was like, you don't have a passport, so let's try to make it in the U.S. Anything you want to see in the U.S., but if there's anything you want to see outside the U.S., we'll go get you. We'll book the flight. We'll get you an emergency passport. We'll leave in 2 days. You want to see the Coliseum. You want to go to, Amsterdam and smoke a joint. Whatever you want to do. I don't care what it is. I'll pay for it. We'll leave right now. And he was like, he's kind of like, are you serious? And I was like, I'm dead serious. Whatever you want to do. And he was like, huh. And he thought about it for a second. He's like, no, we better not. He goes, how about you take care of your mom? When something happens to me, just take care of your mom. And I said, okay. He kind of sat there for a second. We had a silent moment, and I was just driving around. And he was like, hey, and I kind of looked over at him. He goes, do you have it like that? Like you can afford that? I was like, yeah, Dad, I can afford that. And he was like, huh. He goes, that's crazy. He goes, I didn't know that you had it like that. And I was like, well, I kind of keep it from you because I know how you feel about this stuff. So I don't ever want you to feel like I'm rubbing anything in your face. And he was like, oh, no, I don't feel like that. I'm over that. And he goes, but I'm proud of you. And I was like, I kind of snapped my head around. I was like, say it again. Like, I'm looking for something. Hey,
to record
this. Let's say it again. And so he was like, no, I am. And he goes, I know I didn't say it enough. And he goes, but I was proud of you. And I was like, okay. And so, I kind of processed that whole conversation along with that. And I was married at the time, and I kind of went home and, told my now ex-wife what happened. And, it was a good experience. And then less than a week later, he told my mom, he's like, I think it's time for me to go to hospice. And that was his decision. And so he, they called me and like, what do you think we should do? And I was like, what can we do? We knew this day was coming. If he's saying it, that means he's in a lot of pain. He's ready. So he's made his peace with whoever he's going to make peace with, and he's ready to go. So went to hospice. He never, he stayed away. He stayed alive for another 10 days or so, but never woke up again. Never spoke again after that. And then that was it. He died. He actually died Christmas Day of 2014.
Wow.
And so we made the decision Christmas Eve. We're at the hospice place, and we made the decision. He loved Christmas, and we loved Christmas, and so we were like, all right, everybody, let's make the decision. Let's go home, and let's everybody go say bye to him. We'll go have Christmas Day. We'll come back around lunchtime. We'll spend the rest of the day up here, and whatever. And we got the call at like 10 a.m. that he had passed.
Wow.
And so it was almost like he waited for us to leave.
Yeah.
Like he's like, you're gonna leave soon. And he just didn't want it to. I think he just felt like he wanted to be by himself. So, that kind of describes, that's kind of, how my dad was, and kind of describes in a nutshell our relationship from the time I was 8 years old until I was 30. And so it was always like that.
That's a powerful story. And, having a father figure a father that grew up in such a difficult era, mm-hmm. and he taught you discipline, hard work. And sometimes when you do all those right things and you don't see results, it kind of pisses you off.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where maybe it stemmed from, where he sees that he taught you hard work, discipline, and you got results. But is that not a good thing?
I would think so. But, my dad was never, until that day, I was, that was in 2014. So I was, that's
almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's 10 years ago. And so I was 38 years old. And so up until that date, he had never had like a heartfelt conversation with me or anybody as far as I know. And so you would think so. You would think, that, if I didn't have any kids, but if I had a son that was doing well and all those things, it would be me bragging about my son, mm-hmm. and him kind of going, quit telling people I'm rich. Quit telling people I'm,
yeah.
But for him, it was just never like that. And, and his uncle raised him from the time he was a kid, and his uncle was wealthy. And so I just never really understood it. But, you would think that this would be a good thing. Your dad would be proud of you, but he wasn't. Not until the end, until I kind of, hey, these are the parameters I'm going to have a relationship with you. If you violate them, I'm out. And I had to prove to him that was true also, because, I'd made him promises before and told him, hey, I'm going to change this or change that. And then a pretty girl asks me to do something, or a party comes up, or it's time to go to Mardi Gras or whatever, I would skip everything else I was doing, and, I'd quit a job because I wanted to go to this party. And so I'd quit, I'd be like, hey, everything will be on hold, and then just try to unscramble it whenever I got back. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. So it took me a little longer to grow up, and so I had some things to prove to him. So whenever I gave him this, hey, these are the guidelines of our relationship from now on, he was kind of like, okay, well, let's see, whenever you get back out to the world, you start making a little bit of money when you don't need me anymore. Let's see how it goes then let's talk about this again. And so I never broke from it. And he saw me do it to other people. He saw, I was like, hey, how come you don't talk to so-and-so? They're not supporting my life. They didn't add any value to my life, and so I don't talk to them anymore. We've been friends with them since high school. I was like, I know. You would think they'd support my life, support my goals, support all this, support my marriage. You'd think they'd do all that, but they didn't. So forget them.
And you mentioned that in the book, and I love the last chapter of the book because you had a couple takeaways from your life, and one of them was you can't have 100 close friends.
No.
Pick 2 or 3 who support your goals. And I realized that when I kind of started doing the podcast, starting a business, and realizing I had some great friends, and it's like, guys, look what I'm doing, and they all kind of shut me down. And I'm like, maybe we weren't as close as I thought.
Yeah, especially when it comes to supporting your business and all those things. If everybody's going to get to a stage in their life where, they need something that you're doing. For me, it was, I was building houses and all these things. So some of my friends were like, hey, can you build my house? Sure. Here's how much it costs, and here's how much I charge, and all this stuff. Well, how come you can't do it for cost? And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were friends.
Right.
My friends support my business.
There it is.
You're a customer now. This is what all my customers do. So you're just a customer. And so, if you're my friend, you like my product. You're not just using me because you think I'm going to give you a cheap price. And so anybody that did that, I would try to just, I would walk away from the deal. Even if they ended up caving at some point where they're like, no, I'll pay full price. Like, okay, pay it to somebody else.
You would think they would do the opposite, because it's like, I'm willing to support my friend. I want to pay full price.
Yeah.
Which is, maybe it's not the entrepreneurial mindset in people.
I think every human being on earth thinks they have a great idea and thinks they're an entrepreneur. I think everybody thinks they are, so when they see an actual entrepreneur doing stuff, they test their theories through them. And so, he's testing his negotiating skills with you because he knows you. And so, he knows where to stab you. He knows where to he knows what your weak points are. He knows kind of where to, where can I hit him to close this deal to get him to do it for me for cost. And so when you learn that and you start to accept that, you start to realize, wait, these are not my friends. I've got a friend that I've got these guys I've been calling friends that, I've been friends with since I was 14 years old. And then I have this group of friends over here. I've known you for a year, and you're like, hey, Mike, I want you to build my house. And I'm like, okay, this is how much I charge. Cool. Where do I sign?
Right.
And I was like, okay, that's more my friend than this person over here is, because really you're only calling me. And I've noticed you ramped up the calls. And now I know why. You need a house built, and then we get to the negotiating phase about how much it costs, and they're like, "Oh man, that's more than I thought. How about you lower your fee?" Like, no, there's no lowering fees. Because you're my friend, none of these guys cut me a deal.
Right.
Because you're my friend, because they don't know you at all. So if you can talk them into cutting you a deal, I'll cut you a deal. But if you can't talk these guys into cutting you a deal, then I'm not doing it either. And it's like a lumber provider. They're not going to cut me a deal. It's an electrician. It's a guy, another guy like my dad, that is working to feed his family and to do these things, and they're working these hours. And so they're a trade base that they learn this trade, and then you come and ask them, hey, will you do it cheaper? And they're like, no. So I'm not going to do that to them. I'm not going to allow you to do it to me.
Right.
And so I'm an expert in this. Experts make money at what they do. And so I'm not a novice. If you were letting me build your house and it was the first one I ever built, maybe. So I could get the learning experience, but we'd have to talk about your patience with me, because your house can be terrible. It's going to be awful. And I can't guarantee you it's not going to fall down, because I don't really know how to build. That's a different story. But when I've been doing it for 20 years and I finally, cleaned myself up and, started actually doing it as a business, now this is what I do for a living. This is how I feed my family. And so when you start to sort through that and you start to look through, hey, these are my friends, these are my friends, these are my friends, if you start to find that you've got friends all around you all the time, you need to reevaluate that, because, sometimes they're users, sometimes they're followers, and if you've got 100 people in a room and they're all toasting you, you can bet when they turn their back, half of them are rolling their eyes or like, fuck this dude, whatever, because they can't. A lot of it is because they can't believe you're here. Hey, we grew up in the same neighborhood, we grew up at the same time. Why are you like this and why am I like this? And it just has to do with choices. But whenever you're noticing all these things, that's whenever you figure out, okay, this is actually my friends.
Yeah.
These guys are just here because the food's free, they're expensive drinks, they're, whatever, and that's fine. You can entertain that if you decide to, but you got to really figure out who the guys are that, I can tell you 3 guys right now that if I said, hey man, I made a mistake and I killed somebody, they'd be like, all right, cool. Well, let me finish eating. I'll be right over. Just don't do anything. Just, hopefully we've all got those 2 or 3 guys. Hopefully you never have to call them for that. But,
Right.
But the point is, like, they don't ask questions. They don't need anything. You need something, I'm there.
Right.
And, and it's funny because most of my friends that are that way don't even live here.
Wow.
They're in Denver, they're in LA, they're in Florida. And I can make a call, and they'd be like, dude, I'm on the next flight. And I don't even have to tell them, hey, I got trouble. I just need you here. And they wouldn't even ask till they got here. And, make sure nobody's looking. Hey, what happened? Everything good?
Yeah.
So I just think if you don't have those kind of friends, or if you have got too many of those people around that are calling you your friend, then, I think you've got some work to do.
And one thing that's been on my mind recently, and it's kind of funny you said it, you can have someone that's been in your life since you were 14 and someone you met a year ago, and that person that you've met a year ago can add more value and have a tighter relationship with you. One of the quotes I remember is, a client will become a friend faster than a friend will become a client.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I have clients and I realize there's an equal value exchange, and then there's there's finances involved, there's trust involved, that level. So then the trust and credibility goes up between the friendship.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, okay, I can hold you in regards to a financial standpoint, so I know I can trust you.
Yeah.
There's finances at play, there's work at play, there's time and effort and labor, all this at play. So I know that we're friends. So it's so funny, in the year and a half I've been in business for myself, I have made a lot more friends that are going to be with me longer term.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it is good to have those friends that, because I'm the same. Like, a lot of my friends are the guys I do business with, or, people that I know from the fight business. And so I do have a lot of friends that are that way. I have that, it's a small group, so I say a lot, but it's still a small group. I do have a couple of friends that I have known since high school that, they could care less how much money, what TV I'm on. They could care less about any of that. So sometimes it's good to be around those guys where you can.
Sometimes you can't get rid of them.
Sit here and you're just like, man, I don't want to talk about business. I don't want to talk about relationships. I don't want to talk about anything. Kind of just want to watch the game, just be around some people who are just, I know have my back. And so it's good to have those people around, but you got to, kind of categorize your friends also.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go to your best friend from high school that's a high school football coach and tell him, man, my business is doing $25 million this month and I'm trying to make more money off the cash flow from the business. What do you suggest? And they're going to be like, I made $6,000 this month before taxes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So even though he's your really good friend, he's got your back, you got to categorize those friends, because you don't want, if you don't, unless you want to lose touch with those friends, because they're like, man, if all you want to talk about is big business stuff around your buddy who's a coach, they're gonna be like, dude, I don't care about any of that stuff. I'm just, I just want to hang out if that's okay. And then you evaluate yourself. You're not evaluating your friends anymore. You evaluate yourself. You're like, have I outgrown this friendship for what I'm trying to achieve now? And you have to be, big enough to say yes, and then kind of let that friend go, even though they didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And so there is that side of it too. There's a lot of evaluation of your friend group. There's also a lot of evaluation of yourself.
Right.
You're like, hey man, this happens once in a while. Let's just not talk about business. And if I'm not okay with that, I got to make the decisions like, man, that friendship's just not serving me anymore. It used to serve me where I didn't want to talk about anything else. I didn't want to talk about business. I didn't want to talk about really anything. Just wanted to watch football and have a couple of beers. And I'm the one that's not able to do that. And he's probably drifting away anyways, but you got to realize that and be like, man, this just isn't serving me anymore, and do him a favor,
right,
and step out of the friendship.
100%. I want to get into your entrepreneurial sales background, because you've been doing construction for 20-something years now. So how did you start getting into sales, and how did that? Because this is a sales business podcast, so I have all different types of things. So coming in to sales, learning how to sell yourself, and then build and develop who you are as a man, how was that for you?
So the sales part, I joined the military out of high school, and we'll get into the trouble later on. But when I got out of the military, at first I wanted to be a cop, but I'd gotten in trouble, so I couldn't be a cop. So I was like, I went into the military thinking I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. Couldn't be a Navy SEAL, and so decided I want to be a cop. Couldn't be a cop, so my cousin, his name is Kevin Alexander, and he's still one of the best salesmen I've ever seen, even today. And he was like, "Hey, I'm selling these modular homes," and he was like, "Man, I'm making a killing." He goes, "I'm the sales manager now. Come over here, come to Lubbock, and I'll teach you how to sell it. And we'll, you can live with me. You don't have to pay rent. You don't have to pay anything," because, I didn't have any money. So I just moved from Hawaii to Lubbock. And,
wow. What a change.
Yeah. So I went out to Lubbock and started selling these modular manufactured homes, and for a company called Oakwood Homes. And the first month I was just learning the product and learning how to feature benefit and learning kind of the rules of sales. I'd always considered myself kind of a, smooth talker, and I always had, since I was in high school, I'd always had luck with girls in high school, and then women, when in my early 20s. So I thought it's the same thing. I'm just selling, and I'm just, trying to get people to like me, because I know they won't buy it if they don't like me. And so, that was kind of the first lesson I learned. But Kevin kind of taught me through everything, and he took me through. It wasn't a crash course, where he's like, throwing some books in front of me, throwing some theories in front of me, and then just saying, read it, and then just start and trying to learn that way. It was a lot of observation. It was a lot of, we lived together. So it was every night. It was, we worked 7 days a week. We drank 7 days a week. So after work, we get off at 7 p.m. We go to out drinking until about midnight, and all we talked about was work. And all he taught me was about the, how he did these sales and how he made these deals work. So it wasn't just the sales part. It was structuring the deal. It was turning it into finance. It was getting the deal back and then presenting it to the customer, because you're having to bump them up and all those things. So it wasn't like a crash course. It was like a concentrated 7-day-a-week course with him for about 45 days. And then I got released out to the sales floor, and then immediately I just did everything he said. And, he was really high up in the company sales-wise, and then got promoted very, very fast. And so I was like, well, I want to do the same thing. And so I did. In the first 6 months, I think I was the top salesperson in the state of Texas twice.
How old were you at this
back to
point?
back. 22.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so, I was in good shape. I was, I still worked out, and but working 7 days a week, drinking 7 days a week, I just kind of got caught up in the sales lifestyle. And, I went from making $1,300 a month in the military before taxes. And so, you had never had any money to now, 6 months in, like my first month I was a top guy in the state and I think I made $25,000. That was the fourth or fifth month in. The next month I made another 22 or 23,000. And the next month after that I made like 12,000. And then so in that 3 months I'd made more than, 3 times as much as I made the whole year in the military. And I bought a Corvette and I bought a bunch of cool stuff, but I wasn't really doing anything with it. Like I was one of those guys when I was 23 that, if I got a $23,000 check, I went and cashed it, and I'd put a little bit in the bank, and then I would just have it on me all the time. I'd if I had $9,000 on me, you could tell because it was all, and I wanted people to know. I'd kind of prop my shirt on it, and so I was one of those guys. So I
love it.
I was really hard to be around whenever I was.
You're
20.
young.
Yeah.
You're young.
So I kind of relate it to not the NFL star, but the guy, the 52nd man on an NFL roster that makes, back then it was probably $200,000 a year, and that's what I felt like. I was like, man, I just made $20,000 a month, and I would tell everybody, yeah, I made $20,000 this month, and I'm going to make $20,000 next month, and had a bad month, I only made $12,000, and you're 22 years old, and so people were like, what? Like you made what? So Kevin was a big part in that first 6 months, and then.
What was the biggest thing you took away that you could teach someone?
In sales, I would say become an expert, and if you're going to sell something, at first you're just kind of winging it, but on your own time, take the time to learn your product. You're selling cars, know everything about that car, know performance, kind of how it what's better about it than its competitors, what's better about the competitors than this, and then learn how to sell against it. So I would say, on your own time, because it's really difficult to be on the sales floor and then also kind of learn, these specific details about your product while you're on the sales floor. You want to be selling. And so on your own time, become an expert on your product. And, I'm a big believer that no matter what you do, I don't care what it is. If you're the best furniture maker, if you're the best, leathersmith, whatever it is, if you become the best in the world at it, it'll make you rich. And so I just always had that mentality. I was like, I'm going to know these houses inside out. I'm going to all the sales rules, I'm not going to break any of them. I'm never going to give a feature without a benefit. I'm never going to over talk. As soon as they say yes, I want it, I'm going to stop talking. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think there's one thing that makes you successful in sales. I think there's some sales rules that you just don't break, mm-hmm. and those are a few of them. And so I think if you follow that path and then you have good mentors around you that can kind of, and then you not just become an expert on what it is today, but as your industry evolves, become an expert always. So if you're the guy all the time, I don't know how many times I was the guy on a deal, and it wasn't my deal. So I got half that deal just because I was the expert.
Yeah.
There's 15 new guys on the floor. Every one of them
is leveraging
want to
you.
know to somebody is leveraging me. And I'm like, yeah, that information will cost you. This education is going to cost you, and it costs you half their deal. And then, especially when you're young, that's the way it is. You're a shark. Every deal is like, oh, I don't want to give you half my deal. Oh, well, good luck.
50% of some is better than 0% of nothing.
Yeah, you can,
or 100% of nothing.
Yeah, because if somebody's asking you questions that require an expert, they're an educated buyer. And so if you're not willing to go find the expert to help you with it until you become the expert, you deserve to lose that deal.
100%.
Opinion. So, there's not one thing you can do in sales. You got to kind of find your rhythm. You got to kind of find your way. You got to find what works for you. There's some sales guys out there that I've been asked to speak with, and I just don't agree with their philosophy on it.
Yeah.
And so I said no, and then they're like, they rarely get told no. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to speak on it because we have a different philosophy about this. I think you can succeed no matter what you look like, no matter what. You just have to acknowledge that you look like that. You have to acknowledge that if you're cross-eyed, instead of walking up to a customer walking up to you being like, oh man, I got the cross-eyed guy. Acknowledge that you're cross-eyed.
Own it.
Hey, I know I'm cross-eyed. I know I'm ugly, but here's what I know about the cars. If you're 400 pounds and it's 95 degrees outside, don't make them go, this guy's going to die out here with me.
Right.
Tell them, hey, we're going to go out in this heat. Please go slow because I'm fat and I might die. You do that instead of, you can't be successful until you're skinny. You can't be successful until you get your teeth fixed, get your eyes fixed. Okay, fine, but you can do that. But until then, acknowledge that it's there, take away the elephant in the room, and then, people relate to you better. They don't think you're really there to sell them anything. And plus, for whatever reason, human beings are human beings, and they will look at you and make a judgment on you and decide if they're going to buy from you right in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And you should be able to acknowledge that and be able to tell that. And be like, look, I know I'm not the best looking guy, but I do know the most about this car. So if you'll just bear with me, I'll let you know which eye is looking at you, and we can go from there. You make them laugh, and then now that's not on the table anymore. They know they're not on guard about it. And so I just think you can succeed at that anyway. You just got to put the ego aside and decide, I'm just going to acknowledge that this is what I am, present that to them and let them know that I'm not that, and then sell them this car or sell them this house or whatever it is. I just feel like that's a better approach and a more realistic approach to being successful.
And the trust goes up. So once they see you're being honest, the trust goes up. You break kind of a joke or something, and then they realize, okay, I can trust this guy.
Yeah.
You get one yes, leads to another, and then you have the momentum like you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. And momentum in that becomes, that becomes a big tool, especially whenever there's an elephant in the room, especially if the elephant is you and you're like, the elephant's going out of the room right now.
Yeah.
Now everything's even. Now they've gotten over that. Now they're depending on you for information. And that's what you want. And you want them, like you said, saying yes, and you want them acknowledging that you're the expert.
So going back to you're killing it in sales, you're young, you're in your mid-20s, you're making a killing. What happens next? You kind of mentioned your book. I want you to kind of talk about it.
Yeah, so in the book I talk about it a little bit. I was 24 years old. I'd made pretty good money in sales, and I met this girl that was, for some reason, whenever I was younger, I always dated girls that were older than me. And I think it was because when I was a freshman in high school, I was an exceptional athlete. And so as I aged through high school, all my friends were older and older and older because, my freshman year I played varsity sports and 3 sports. And so all these people went to college. And so I started dating college girls when I was a sophomore, and then junior and senior. And eventually ended up with girls in high school again, but yeah, I've always had this thing for older women, and not like 20 years older, but she was 4 years older than me. She had a daughter that was 4 years old, and we're great friends now. But we met kind of at a bar, and I kind of told her, hey, this is kind of what I want to do, and she was really supportive. She's like, yeah, you should do that. And I was like, well, I'm still young, and I've tried to do this and that, and I don't really have the credit. And she's like, I'll help you. And we were in a brand new relationship, like a couple months. And so I was like, okay. So spent a lot of time together, and, we ended up, I started this business doing demolition and excavation, and we were doing like construction cleanups for residential properties. And then we got an erosion control job. I just never said no to anything.
Yeah, you were getting jobs, random jobs, and you're like, yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm at a gas station with some of my equipment and some of my guys, and I'm driving the equipment, and this guy sees all these guys talking to me, and you can tell when he pulled up, he's like, oh, this must be the boss. And he says, sir, and I kind of turned around. You can tell on his face, he's like, oh shit, this is a kid. And so I was like, yes, sir. And he's like, hey, by any chance have you ever done a demolition job? I need a house torn down. And I was like, yeah, we know what to do. And I was like, so where's the job, and what is it? And he's like, it's over here, follow me. So we went and looked at it, and he's like, can you do it? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, but I really don't know how to price it. This isn't my wheelhouse. And I was like, so I don't know how to price something like this, so why don't you tell me what your budget is? And he's like, I've got $25,000 in my budget to do this. And of course I was like, oh, $25,000. because I'm looking at it and I was like, I think I could take that down in one day.
Yeah.
And so we did. We took it down. It was very unconventional the way we got it to the ground, but we did. We took it down, and then the golf course asked us, hey, do you guys do erosion control? I was like, yeah. And so I had to go ask my dad, what is erosion control? And he's like, silt fence and Curlex and all these things, and it's to keep the dirt from going down on the greens and all those things. They want you to stop that. So you're going to put silt fence around. I was like, cool. Well, I just signed a contract with them. They're going to pay me this much a month to do all the erosion control maintenance on the golf course. And he's like, what? So I signed this contract. I went and did it. We fixed some of their silt fence, but I still didn't know what erosion control was. And so we signed a deal with them that day to fix it, because we just went over and fixed it. And they're like, how much do I owe you? I just made up a number. It was way too low. And so they were just like, hey, you want to just do the maintenance on it? You come in here, once a week, and you just walk the course, and any of this needs to be fixed, you fix it, and we'll just pay you this much a month. And I was like, yeah. So we did. I never said, so all of a sudden I'm in all these things. Now I'm in the demolition business. I'm still cleaning up residential properties. And, we get to a point where we're getting more and more customers, and I figure out it's because I'm pricing things too low. And so, I'm starting to figure out the pricing, but now, companies are calling me and I need more equipment. And so I go to my girlfriend. I'm like, yeah, I need to buy another piece of equipment, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, hey, I'm not doing any more of this. I'm not supporting any more of this unless we're married. And I was like, oh, you spoiled the surprise. I was gonna, so I kind of made a business decision that quick to marry her. And so, and we laugh about this now, because like I said, we're great friends now, and we laugh about it now. But I mean, we got married kind of on a whim, and then she supported the business a little more. And of course, whenever you make a business decision to get married, it falls apart pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And so, because, I was still sales Mike. I was running a business now, but I was still partying just as hard. I was still, didn't really know how to manage cash flow. Didn't really, know. I was like, man, our billing was $100,000 this week. And, I was like, I could take off the rest of the month if I wanted to, but not realizing you're going to get invoices, and, these bills are due, and you haven't been keeping up with it. So you really don't even know how much it is. You don't even know if 100,000 covers it. So I was kind of working my way through this business, and then, of course, the relationship fell apart, and, now we're married. So this is community property. We decided to sell off everything and split it. And, I left with a decent chunk of money, and I just thought I was rich. And so, it didn't take long for that money to be gone. But it was a big lesson in, entrepreneurship that failed. And, even if I would have kept going, I think it eventually would have failed, because I wasn't scaling it properly. I wasn't growing at the rate I could afford to grow at. I was kind of depending on, I had like one credit card with like a $750 limit at that point in my life, because I'd never had one. And so, and then just living off whatever cash we were making the payments on the equipment, and, trying to live a lifestyle, and, just eventually it would have fell apart. So luckily the relationship saved me from maybe financial ruin later on. A failed relationship saved me from maybe a failed, everything later on. So I was pretty thankful for that long term, looking back on it.
What I love about your story is that this is all happening in DFW.
Yeah.
And so I've been in Dallas since I was 2 years old, so I love this city. Mm-hmm. And you grew up in Fort Worth area, yep. and so it's like I'm hearing this, and you're saying you're at the stockyards, you're out here, you're out there, and I'm like, this is my home. So I love that part.
Yeah. And some of the bigger jobs where we tore down a fire station in Fair Park for somebody, and they couldn't really figure out how I was getting all these jobs. I was just this kid in these bid meetings, and we'd listen to it. I'd kind of go out there. I think I was doing recovery costs on a lot of stuff that, I was selling some stuff on the back end. So it took me a little longer to take it down, but I wasn't just throwing everything away and, loading everything up. They were about speed and, getting it down to the ground, loading it in their trucks, and then getting it to the dump, and then getting their money. And I was about, let me take a little bit more time. I'll bid less, but I can sell this steel building, secondhand, because it's a bolt together building. We'll cut all this up. We'll have a steel building company come. They'll take it down for free just for the building. And so, but it's going to take them longer than if we just take a an excavator and just crumble this thing up and peel the skin off and then take the frame down. And so that's how I would sell it to these people. And I was like, I'm going to take 8 days longer, but I'm going to do it for $40,000 cheaper.
Wow.
And they're like, how's that possible? And I was like, well, that's for me to know. And if I told you that, you go start your own excavation business, and you would put me out of business. And so they couldn't really figure it out. And so I was successful in that. So it was a good experience in selling something. I was just selling everything too cheap.
That's amazing that you were able to like strategize. And what I love about your stories also is that you have a partying phase, and I have a partying phase, and mine was a pretty long phase. And a lot of people I sit with and talk to that become really, really successful, I feel like they all had a partying phase. Kind of, you talk about a lot in your book.
Yeah.
Kind of go into that, and then how you were able to still be successful while doing that.
Yeah. I didn't talk about this part a lot in the book, but I would say that I didn't have the Michael Irvin gene. I did talk about that. Michael Irvin was one of those guys when he played for the Cowboys, he could party all night, and then practice time, he got up, he was on time, and he balled at practice. And I was a guy that was like, if I go out, I'm going to stay out till 2 o'clock in the morning. There's no way I'm getting up at 6:30 to be at work at 7:30. I'm going to get up at 11. I'm going to go to work at 12, and then I'll just work till dark. And then at dark, I'll go put all my stuff away, change shirts, and I'll go to the bar again. And, my mentality was, who cares when the 8 hours is? Who cares if it's from 11 to 9 p.m.? Who cares? And you start to realize that people in business just don't function that way. They're just not, it doesn't register in their brain that way. They don't want you in their subdivision cleaning their houses up while these families are eating dinner that have just bought these houses or anything like that. They don't want that. So, but I was the same way when, after I sold the business and decided, we got rid of the business, and I decided to get back into, I wanted to get back into the workforce, but I was like, I looked back on kind of what I wanted when I was a kid, and I saw a guy, kind of come and yell at my dad one day while I was at work with him. I was like 9 years old, and I was like, who is that? Because I thought, oh, my dad's about to kill this guy. He just yelled at him. So it turns out he was a superintendent for a builder that my dad worked for, and my dad was late or something, and he came over and yelled at him, you need to get this done, blah, 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 and he get out of here. And he's like, yes, sir. And I was like, oh. And so I was like, that's what I want to do. So I knew it when I was young. So I kind of wanted to get into this, but I wanted to get into the construction side instead of on the sales side, and then maybe go back to the sales side doing something over here with building materials or something like that. But whenever you're young and you get into the construction business, you kind of run with, there's like a group that are fresh out of college that are, they're living that lifestyle, and they just did it for 4 years where, they partied in college, and sometimes they didn't have class, or if they did have class, they didn't want to go tell mom and dad that, hey, I didn't go to class because I got drunk last night. So they had the Michael Irvin gene where they could go out and party, and they could get up the next day, and they could do it. And, I just couldn't. But I kind of, I had this fear of missing out. I had all these things that I would think about all the time. I would always convince myself that my opportunities were there. And, it's like, what am I doing here? I kept calling it networking. I was like, I'm not partying, I'm networking. And so, I ran a business and did this stuff, and, I bragged a lot about having a business at such a young age. And, I didn't tell them how it ended, but, I would just tell them, yeah, I got out of it, but I'm getting into something else. And so it was just, it was 6 nights a week. I was out, and I was just calling it networking. And I was like, but, you're networking with a bag in your car all the time, because I never knew where I was going to end up. And, I was like, I was one of those guys that, I don't know why, I'm not the best looking guy in the world, but I've always had luck with women. And so I would go to the bars, I'd spit some game at them, and, and then I might end up at their house. And sometimes I might end up at their house for 2 days. You never knew. And so I was just one of those guys that was really unpredictable and, kind of wild. But when I was at work, I was focused, and I was, you just didn't know when I was going to get there. And I would leave at whatever time, as long as it gave me plenty of time just to go shower, get something to eat, and then go back out and network. And so that was my lifestyle for a long time. And, in between there, I started playing semi-pro football and, still doing some cool stuff and still working out and still, kind of, I was popular, but, and I always made decent money, but I just never had any. And so, you have nice things and you kind of go in and out. You ebb and flow, and so you're only really bragging about it when you're flowing, when you're ebbing, and you're kind of being quiet and you're kind of sitting in the corner, and you're just like, oh, I'm taking it easy tonight, which they believe because you're out every night, so you're taking it easy tonight. But really, I get paid tomorrow. I've got $25 in my pocket, and that's it. And so you kind of have this secret life that you're portraying yourself as this, and kind of a playboy out in town, and everybody knows you. And like you said, like we said, I got 1,000 friends, and that's just the way I thought it worked. And so I thought, my opportunity will come eventually. The big one will come eventually when I meet the right person, or whenever I see the right person, or the right person hears me talk, or I've run into somebody who does some kind of big business, and they're going to hear me like, oh, I got to have you. And I just convinced myself that moment was going to happen eventually. And of course, people who do big business look at guys like that and they're like, what a clown. And so, you don't realize that until later on in life when you start doing big business and you see guys like that and you're like, oh, shit, that was me.
Wow.
And so you notice that this hasn't served for what I've wanted. I've been lying about kind of what I was, or, I've been living in my potential for, my whole life. Never really realized it. I've been able to do it this whole time. I just refused to jump out of this circle that I was in, where I convinced myself I was networking and not being an idiot.
That's crazy. It's funny because I can relate to that. There was a point in my life where I was convincing myself I'm networking too, and I'm just going out and drinking.
Yeah.
But you kind of briefly touched on, you mentioned in the book, you went into, you've been athletic your whole life, and you went and played semi-pro football.
Yeah.
So this was after you got out of prison, right?
No, this was before.
Before, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe kind of go through that timeline again.
Yeah, so I got, we got divorced. We got rid of all the stuff in the business. I bought a Porsche, and then I was like, I'm going to get some menial job, but I want to do something athletic because, even though I made the decision to get married for the wrong reason, it still affects you whenever you get divorced and whenever you're like ending a relationship that was a big part of your life. And, they're like, up to that point, they're like, really, this is the only person that's ever supported a dream at all. And so, and you just take it for granted. So it's still tough, even though, you're like, it's probably best we get divorced. I'm not really much of a husband. I'm not really much of a father figure for this kid. And so bought a Porsche, and I was like, I'm just going to walk on to this team and just see if I make it, see if I've still got it. 'Cause, I was extremely fast and extremely athletic. And so I walked on, and they're like, what position you want to play? And I was like, well, I was a running back in high school. And they were like, no. And so they're like, you're built like a slot receiver a little bit, but you're almost too big for a slot receiver. We'd rather you play defense. I was like, I don't want to play defense. I was like, I want to score touchdowns.
I knew you were going to say,
yeah. I was like, I want to score touchdowns. I want to wear sunglasses in a bar. That's kind of I want to be a receiver. And so I was like, they're like, how are your hands? And I was like, that'll improve. I was like, but, my hands are okay. And so I went to the tryout, and of course, when we ran and we got our times, they were like, all right, he's on the team. Let's just figure out what he can do. And so, I'd been catching passes and, catching thousands of balls now, and I was becoming an expert. And so, learning this offense, learning the playbook and all this stuff. And then, I made the team. They're like, you're going to play special teams and you're going to be the backup slot receiver. And I was like, all right, cool. So
What age is this at? What age are you at that point?
24, 25.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You just go walk on.
Yeah. So I was 20. I think it was 25, almost 26. And so I go. So I make it, and one of my teammates was Brad Imes, and I didn't know anything about him then. I just knew he was 6'7". He had long hair. He was ripped, and I was like, "This is the largest human being I've ever seen." And turns out he played left tackle at Missouri, and he was a strength and conditioning coach, assistant strength and conditioning coach at TCU. And so, so we became friends, and we played for the first season, played for the second season. About halfway through the first, well, not halfway, a couple games into the first season, the person who started at slot receiver in front of me got hurt, and so I had to step up. And so once I took that position, I learned it inside out. My routes were perfect. Everything was perfect. Good chemistry with the quarterback. I never lost that position again. And I had a knack for, if it was a close game or an overtime, we had a guy named Charles Humphrey that was a really good receiver that ended up going to play for the Packers for a little bit. So he was double, triple covered every time, and they're like, this white dude that's right in here on the inside that weighs 200 pounds. He's a slot receiver. We're going to cover him with a linebacker, and then I blow past everybody, and in overtime I'm scoring the touchdown.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it happened a lot, and so that's when T.O. was playing, and so they started calling me OT instead of T.O. because in overtime it was my game, like every single time, either at the last minute or I'm playing safety on a field goal that we're gonna kick to win the game, and I'm so exhausted, and so I'm playing safety on the end, just blocking them from coming around the edge, and all of a sudden I see the guy start to blitz, and then he stops and he starts to run backwards, and I was like, it's a botched snap. And so I just take off down the field. Me and the kicker are really tight, and he's still one of my best friends today, and I just take off running toward the goal line. I turn around and look at him. We make eye contact. He throws it to me. I catch it. I spike it. I fall down. I'm like, but we win the game. And so but things like that happen over and over and over for 3 seasons. And I made the All-Star team, and so saw a lot of guys go to the NFL, and I got to go to an NFL combine, a regional combine, not the big combine where the college guys go, but they do regional combines, or they did back then, where it was almost like an open tryout, but you kind of had to be invited. But if you walked up and were 6'6" and and said, hey, I run a 4.3, they're gonna be like, yeah, come on in, put this t-shirt on. And so I went, scored really well and everything. Vertical jump was good. I bench pressed 225 19 times in their time limit, and ran a 4.4 in the 40. And they were like, there was only one guy in the NFL that looked like me that was playing receiver at the time. And so, and our sponsor for this was Plaxico Burris, who's 6'6". He's huge. And so, he looked at me and he's like, this is never going to happen for you. You know that, right? Just enjoy your time here. Just enjoy it today. But, you're not an NFL receiver. And I was like, oh, okay. So I kind of accepted that, but still it was cool being around all these NFL rejects that were playing with us, and then seeing guys that I played with go to the NFL. It was pretty cool. So that for 3 seasons, but the seasons stagger. They're not like seasons like 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like we played 3 seasons in like 15 months. So
wow.
So you play like an outdoor season, then you play an indoor season, then you play another outdoor season, and then that was it. So started getting kind of up there. I felt like I was getting old. And so I was like, all right, by this time I was building houses, and I was working for a builder, kind of learning how to do this. And so played for 3 seasons, decided to stop, concentrated on building houses, and then met another one of my closest friends. His name is Corby, and he was building a house at the time. And he had this guy that was building this house. He's like, man, I don't think he's doing a good job. He's like, can you come walk it and just tell me if there's something wrong with it? And so I went and walked it, and it was a nightmare. And I found out it was because Corby was like, oh, you're my friend, do it for nothing. And the guy did, so he didn't pay any attention to it.
The walkthrough?
Yeah, so he didn't do, the guy was he was doing it for Corby for basically nothing.
Oh, I see what
And
you're
so
saying.
he's like, so he's not going to spend a ton of time on it. He's not making any money on it.
Yeah,
So he's kind of just letting the trades build the house. And I went and walked. I was like, he's not paying attention to this. And he's like, well, will you finish it for me? And I was like, yeah, this is how much I charge. And so he's like, oh, okay. And so Corby's one of those guys that grew up wealthy. And so he was wealthy even then in our 20s. Well, as we were building this house, we kind of started hanging out all the time. We became really close friends, started a home building company. And it was during our time during that building that home in the home building company in 2006 that I got in trouble for the second time. And November 20th of 2006, thought I was going to jail for 30 days, and 30 days later they sentenced me to 4 years in prison. And so that was the end of that business. Plus, the economy crashed a couple years later while I was in prison. So terrible economy out. Gas was $5 a gallon here or whatever it was in 2008, 2009. And then, I had a house then, had a vehicle, had, a bunch of nice clothes and all those things. And June 3rd, 2009, I was released. Found out that day I had nothing. Everything had been lost. Everything. And so I had a $50 check, and I was like, how's my bank account? And they're like, it's you're overdrawn, way overdrawn. And so I couldn't even cash this check.
Wow.
And so I didn't have a driver's license. I didn't have I didn't have my birth certificate. I didn't have anything. So didn't have a pair of shoes. So this clown suit that they put you in whenever you're released, and they call them Bruce Lee's, but they're like slippers. That's what you have when you get released. They give you a $50 check that most people probably can't cash, and tell you, hey, within a couple of days you got to call and report to your parole officer. And so I didn't even know how I was going to do that, but went to my dad's house, and they kind of told me on the way home, hey, we lost everything, all your stuff, all your clothes, everything's gone. And I was like, oh. So, and then I was kind of relieved by it. I was like, okay, I mean, I'm not tied to anything then. I don't have any payments due. I don't have anything. So I can really do anything. Everything is up from here. So there's nothing off the table now. Sometimes you got to, all right, got to start paying for my house again. Got to start paying for this truck again. So I'm going to stay in this job because it's paying these bills. But, and you just don't really know how to do anything else. And so, this feeling of relief took me a couple hours on the way home from Huntsville, Texas. But, driving home, after a couple hours, I was like, I'm all right. I was like, I'm good. I'd been spending this whole time, almost 3 years in prison, recalibrating and reframing reality in my head, and kind of changing myself from the inside out to where my goal when I got out, I was like, I don't want anybody to recognize me, not the way I look. I'm going to be the same as far as that goes, but I don't want to be a liar. I don't want to tell people that I am something that I'm not. I don't want to be I don't want to have the potential always to be something great. I want to be something great. I want to fulfill that potential. I want to perform. I don't want to be this guy who just was a waste. And I didn't realize what people were telling me whenever I said they said you have this potential to be this great, whatever you want to be, and all these things. My dad had programmed me that that's not true. And and so to finally feel relief from this, to say, no, I know I can, and here's how I'm going to do it. And if you guys don't support me, no matter who you are, grandma, dad, mom, whoever it is, you're out of my life. And even if I need you, I'm still going to cut you out of my life, or when I don't need you, I'm going to cut you out of my life, whatever it is. However you cope with that, those are the decisions I made. And so I wasn't going to be in that. I wasn't going to be categorically, I wasn't going to be the same as I was before. And also categorically, I wasn't going to be in this 98% recidivism that these guys have when they come out.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't going to be either one of these things. So I had this idea about what I wanted to be, and it was very, grandiose. It was very big, and it was very, I made a vision board while I was in prison. I looked at it every day. I read these affirmations to myself every single day. And you're reading these things, and then sometimes you'd be like, man, a private jet might be a little bit too big of an aspiration. I don't, can you get that? How much money do you need to have a private jet? I didn't know these things, but I was going to learn as soon as the information was available to me. I was going to learn, and then I wanted to see, but I didn't want anybody to damage this image of what my life would look like whenever I got out and whenever I rebuilt myself. And I didn't have a time frame. I just knew it was going to be this way. And so I never stopped believing that ever. And I still have 2 of those things from that vision board are still on my vision board. One of them's a private jet, and one of them I could have bought, but I didn't. I passed on it. And so
what was it? You got to tell us.
Yeah. So I had a Lamborghini on my vision board, but to me that was always the that was one of the beacons of success. If you drove a Lamborghini, then you were rich, you were successful, you had to be. As when I came to the point where I could afford it, I knew 5 people that had Lamborghinis that were scrambling every month to make the payments on them. And the image I had in my head was that they had more money than I did.
Wow.
Because I was like, they have a Lamborghini. How could you? So then I started to realize, and I was like, okay, I can buy a Lamborghini if I want one, but like, what's the cost of ownership and what's that? And then I had an Aston Martin on my vision board also. So when I went to compare them, I was like, the Aston Martin's cheaper. Let me buy this. So I go to buy an Aston Martin, and I talked to this sales guy, and he's like, you ever own an Aston Martin? And I was like, no, but I've always wanted a supercar. Went through the whole thing with him, and this has been on my vision board for a while, and this is almost 10 years after I got out of prison. And so he was like, will you do me a favor? And I was like, sure. And he goes, will you go shop for used Aston Martins before you buy a new one? I was like, well, I was kind of offended. I was like, well, I can afford a new one, and he was like, I agree. He goes, I know you can. I think you can. He goes, but the cost of ownership on these things is, buying it is one thing. The cost of ownership on them is completely different. So you need to know this car. And I think buying a used one, or shopping for a used one at least, from individuals is going to tell you a lot about what's wrong with these cars and kind of what the little, because all supercars have them.
The upkeep.
And so, yeah, the upkeep, and then they have these little weird things. Oh, you got to put it on a trickle charger because this car is always alive. A Lamborghini is always alive. It's always doing something. So if you're not going to drive it for 6 months and you don't put it on a trickle charger, you're going to put that thing in the shop whenever you get back, and it's going to cost you, $20,000 to get it out of the shop because new battery, new, all these things you don't think about, and you're like, and the whole time that he said you got to put it on a trickle charger, he's telling you all this stuff, and you're like, no, I got it. And you walk out of there, what is a trickle charger?
Yeah.
And so if you don't know that stuff, you're like, it can cost you a lot of money for ownership, and then you're like, this thing's a piece of shit, and I should have never bought this. Well, then you haven't been doing the yearly maintenance on it, because what does that cost? And if you don't do the yearly maintenance on it, even if it doesn't need it, you still have to do it. Even if it doesn't need it, because if you don't do it, you'll never sell it.
Yeah.
So it was another good lesson that I learned. I ended up buying a used one. I loved it. And so I was an Aston Martin guy from then on. And so I love Aston Martins. And so I just sold mine last year and ordered another one. And so I'm just waiting for the new one to come in. It's already came in once, and I passed on it. It's coming again. I passed on my allocation the first time because I was like, I don't really, it's a $200,000 car. I don't really know if I want to spend $200,000 at this point because I was getting divorced and all this other stuff. So, I didn't really know how the business was going to go. So I passed on the first allocation, but I'm ready for it when it comes up this time.
I love it.
Yeah.
And so then you come out of prison, and then fast forward to when you start the business you have now.
So it wasn't that long, actually. And the business I have now is not the same business I had back then. Mm-hmm. And so I have a day job. I'm the COO of somebody else's business, it's Corby, the guy that we did the home building company. He's got a pretty big construction company now, and he actually recruited me to come over and be his COO to help him grow his company. And that's kind of a story in itself. But I do that during the day, and then I have a concrete company that I run also because I have full autonomy at my job, and we're running pretty clean now, and everything's good, and I've got all the people in the right places. So I have a concrete business, and it's doing pretty well. And I have a grinding abrasives company that we sell grinding abrasives to metal fabricators and the oil field and things like that.
How do you know to get into all these random businesses?
Man, my first business was Malex Enterprises whenever I got out, and I wrote it in my journal, and I kind of came up with a bunch of different names. When I was in prison, I have a journal that I go back to every once in a while to kind of ground myself. I never want to forget those days, and I think about them a lot. And so, especially if I'm, sitting on a private plane or sitting on a yacht somewhere, and I'm like looking around, and I was like, I had nothing. In 2008, I was sitting in a prison, and I was just with nothing and nothing to eat, and nobody helping me, and it was just. So I have those moments a lot where I think about that, because I never want to forget that those things can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first business I wrote in my journal was Malex Enterprises, because I was like, when I start another business, I want it to sound huge. I want it to be I want the business to sound like somebody, like we have 10,000 employees. And so my first initial, my first name, and the first four letters of my last name, Malex Enterprises, and the logo is a big building with these two Saturn rings around it. And if you looked at my logo, you looked at I still have that business still open, but we're not doing anything else with it yet. But I started this business, and I started out just doing I worked for my dad laying rock when I first got out. I was making $12 an hour. So I was laying rock and then laboring for the other guys in my dad's business. And then I kind of started hustling business up for my dad. And I was like, hey, I don't think you're charging enough for this. I've asked around, like the other builders, their bricklayers are charging them this. He's like, oh, you can't get that around here. So I just kind of told a couple of his builders, hey, we're raising our prices a little bit. And they're all like, oh, I was wondering when y'all were going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So we did that, and then I started selling like side jobs. And so again, I was working 7 days a week. I started doing jiu-jitsu like 2 weeks after I got out, and I was doing jiu-jitsu and MMA, and but I was doing that in the evenings, but I was working 7 days a week. So I'd get these side jobs for my dad, and then we'd do those on the weekends, and he would split those with me. So I'm making $12 an hour laying rock during the week, and then on the weekend I'd make $3,000 because I'm splitting this job that I sold for my dad. And so and I'm selling them really high, because I'm like, I'm going to sell it high because I don't really want to work this weekend, but if I can make $3,000, of course I'm going to do it. So, especially when you're trying to rebuild. And so I was doing that 7 days a week, did that for 6 months. And then finally, I started dating, who I ended up marrying, and we 6 months after, I was like, I'm gonna go out on my own. I appreciated Dad, and that was in I got out in June of 2009. That was about in January of 2010. I built I went to mycorp.com and built my company, Malex Enterprises, and did the articles of incorporation and all that stuff myself. Paid $300 for it or whatever it was, and got my articles, opened an account, and I started selling my own jobs. And first job I did was like an outdoor kitchen for an apartment complex. And then Ventura Living was the company, and they own apartments all over the country, huge portfolio of apartments. So I kind of got in with those managers and started selling, like, hey, I'll paint this or whatever you need, and because I'd built houses and done some really small light commercial stuff, and so I kind of built my business around it. But it was just different. It was like, I'm in a relationship now that I care about, and I want to impress this girl, and she's not going to put up with any she's not put up with me going out. This is a school teacher who's a special ed teacher. He's got 2 kids that are teenagers or about to be teenagers. And so, it was like, she knew me back in my party days.
Mm-hmm.
And so, she wouldn't date me for 3 months. We were just friends. And so, finally I convinced her to go on a date with me. And then we were together for 10 years after that, or 11 years. And so, yeah, I kind of built the business up, and then, we moved in together, and then we were renting a house in Trophy Club, and we were like, hey, the lease is up. It's kind of an old house. Let's find something newer to live in. We can afford a little bit more now. And so I was like, why don't we just build a house? And so we borrowed the money from my dad's banker, who had known him forever, at Justin State Bank, and he loaned us $200,000 to build a house and a guest house, because my mother-in-law lived with us, and we wanted her, out of the house, and so we put her behind us. So I built it myself for $200,000. We, built a 1,900 square foot house and like a 800 square foot guest house in Justin, Texas, and bought the lot. It was a 1 acre lot. Bought it for cheap from one of our buddies, and he did hook us up. And then, we lived there and kind of built the business from there, building our relationship from there. We ended up getting married in 2012. And then, one day somebody came along and was like, hey, I'm proud of it. I'm like, man, my business, I made $200,000 this year, and my business is doing well. And, I'm kind of working all over the place. And, I had a kind of a way of running my business now that it was, we felt like it was, we could run any business like this. It didn't matter what the business was. I felt like I could run any business like this. And so, somebody just came along, and one day I was outside, and they're like, hey, we love your house with the guest house. We can't find anything like it. Will you sell it? And I was like, no, it's not for sale. And then before they drove off, I was like, wait, how much are you willing to pay for it? And they were like, $500,000. I was like, what? So I lived in it for a couple of years. I built it for $200,000. And so now all of a sudden we sell the house. I got this big dump of cash in there. I'm making $400,000. We rent a house while I'm building our new house, and the next house we build is 7,000 square feet. And then it kind of, as we got the plans for it, they're like, can we build this big? And I was like, I don't know, it'd be cool to have a house this big. And so we had the plans. I was like, we'll just put it on the vision board. Well, the business started doing better. We acquired another business. We ran it the same way. So now we had 2 businesses, and we were killing it. And I was making $40,000 to $80,000 a month. And then, man, we built the big house. And by 2015, I had my black belt in jiu-jitsu. I had this $1 million house, and we had $500,000 or $600,000 in equity in it, and we had $500,000 or $600,000 in the bank. So technically, we were millionaires by 2014 or 15, and then we had $1 million in cash in the bank by 2016. Now we're making $600,000 or $700,000 a year. Now she's being elevated through the school district, and so I'm running these 2 businesses. She's the she's the assistant superintendent for Northwest ISD. So now we're a powerhouse, and we don't do anything without each other. And I don't, people come up like, hey, you want to do a guys' night out? No, if my wife ain't going, I ain't going. And that's kind of how I treat my relationships today. And but that relationship, it was great. We had a great relationship for 11 years, never really had any problems ever. And then she got an offer to be the deputy commissioner of education in Austin, and that was kind of the beginning of the end for us. We had a house up here, which is $1.5 million house. We had a house down there. There's $1 million house in Austin Country Club. Business is doing great, and we kind of betrayed the foundation of what we built our relationship around. And because we thought we've been doing this for 10 years, we're strong enough to do this for a couple years. You're not. And so ended up fizzling out, and around the same time COVID happened. So that was devastating to my life and also to my business. And so that's kind of how that elevated. And there's a lot of information there, and we've skipped around a lot. But there's a lot of things that happened in there to get to that point. But you know, even today, I still stick to those principles that I have that journal next to my bed. I read it every few days. These are the promises I made to myself whenever I got out.
Wow.
I would do this every day, every week, every month, whatever it was. I had like 10 or 11 promises on there that I made to myself that I would do whenever I got out. And they start out, these things are this big, and now it's kind of these promises you have to keep. You're keeping these promises around the world now.
Mm-hmm.
Then I was like, okay, I just gotta live within myself, and I gotta, I'm gonna make my bed every day. That was my first promise. It's like, if I can't contribute monetarily, I'm gonna contribute something to the household that I'm living in. So I knew I was gonna have to go live with my parents for a little while. I couldn't contribute really anything, but I was like, I'm gonna make my bed every single day, so that if they walked in my room, they're not gonna be, God, it's like a teenager in here again. I just didn't want that. So I did it. Still make my bed today. As soon as my feet hit the floor, I turn around, make the bed every single day. And so I just make those promises to myself, and they become part of your lifestyle, and they become part of your discipline program that you build for yourself every day. And you do those things every day, and you don't really have any money to do them with before, but you're still abiding by those principles, and you're still abiding by those things that you're going to make yourself do every day. Well, if you do those things when you have nothing, when you do have something, you're disciplined about it every day. I'm going to check my bank accounts. I'm going to check my investments. I'm going to check myself on where I am in this timeline to the promises I made myself. I'm going to be honest about the way I'm doing business. I'm going to be honest about the way I am in my relationships. I'm going to be honest about the way I am to myself. I'm going to evaluate myself every month. Did I get better this month? Did I get worse this month? And then within that, you do these micro ones every day. Was I productive today? What did I do today? And did I do something today to improve a little bit from yesterday? And what's my to-do list today? Did I get all of it? And am I just being lazy, or am I procrastinating and pushing it to tomorrow? Can I do it today? And if the answer is yes, then no matter if it's 7 or 8 o'clock at night, you still do those things. And then those things you find whenever you didn't have anything, you were doing those things, you're like, oh, this helped me get something.
Yeah.
And then people change, and they're like, oh, now that I've got something, I'll go to this instead, and I'll do this instead, and then I'll hire people to do this for me. And then all of a sudden you've got all this overhead, but you don't have any more money than you had, and you've got all these things where it looks like you're active, and you've got a lot of activity, but it's not actually producing anything. And that's what I did not want. I wanted to do these things all the time. So if I could get better, and if it was something I was doing I needed to improve, that I made sure that I did that.
Man, I want to spend so much more time with you. We're almost an hour and a half in, but I want to get to jiu-jitsu and how you got into Fury fighting and kind of all that.
Yeah, so it's a weird coincidence, but I started doing jiu-jitsu like June 14th or 15th of 2009. I got out June 3rd. A couple weeks later, Brad Hines had hooked me up with Warrior Wear. They geared me up. One of my other friends, without me knowing, paid for 2 years of my tuition to jiu-jitsu because they knew that I needed to be in something. They're like, Mike, you're really good at everything you touch, but you need to be good at something that can still humble you every day. And they knew that about me, but I didn't really think that about myself until I was a couple years into prison. And I was like, I really talk a lot of shit about how good I am at these things, but let me try something I'm bad at, or something that I claim to be. You always claim, you're like, yeah, I've been in some street fights and I've done well and I've never lost. I'm really tough, and you make all these excuses, and then they're like, go in there where people are skilled in fighting, and it's kind of like going into a place where people are skilled in business. They see the clown that you are whenever you're in there, and you go in there and tell in a gym, a jiu-jitsu gym or a fight gym, yeah, I've been in a bunch of street fights and I've never lost. You're the same clown that you were to the business guy when you were in there telling people, bragging about how much you sold and all this stuff. And so so Brad hooked me up with Travis Luter, and went in there and talked to him, and I made him some promises too that I'd made myself if I jump into, because I knew when I was in prison I was going to do this. So I was like, all right, I'm going to be the best student at that gym. I'm going to be the most attentive. I'm going to show up every day. And if I'm not able to show up, I'm going to call them and tell them why I can't show up. Well, I didn't realize at the time that, you're thinking they're coaches like they were when you were in high school or whenever you were kids, but this is you're there voluntarily. So the first time I missed, I called and I was like, "Hey, Travis, I'm not gonna be able to make it tonight." And he was like, "Okay, well, whatever," and just kind of hung up because he don't care. So, so I did all those things. I was, a good student. I was went and interviewed with Travis. He was not impressed with me at all. And so I told him I wanted to fight in 3 months. He was like, "You're out of your mind." And so, so on my own, I went and found myself a fight. I started training MMA and, was a very unskilled, but, a month into training, I went and told all my coaches, "Hey, I have a fight October 3rd in San Antonio. Y'all need to help me get ready for it." And everybody's like, "Are you serious?" And I was like, "Yeah." And it wasn't that I thought I was a badass or that I thought I could win that fight even. I was like, I want to do the training as hard as I can. If I don't schedule a fight, I might look for a reason to skip the training. And so I was like, I want to have something that I'm training for. Plus, I want to lead up to that. And I've got a lot of aggression to get out. I want to get it all out. And then I'll fight that first fight. Win or lose, I'll decide after that, the night after that fight, either from the hospital or from the after party, whatever it is, I'll decide at that time if I want to keep going forward and keep doing this. And so, I went and, killed the dude in the first round, beat him up really bad. But he made it to the second round. Second round I was doing the same thing, and he armbarred me. And, in the second round, so I tapped, so I lost, but everybody still couldn't believe how well I did because I only been training for 3 months. So, they asked me not to fight for another year, so I didn't. I just trained for a year solid, 7 days a week. And still working, still doing all the stuff, still getting into my own business, and then the people at the gym, I never told them I went to prison. Never told them. Travis knew, but he didn't tell anybody, and he didn't care, didn't bother him. But he, none of them ever knew, and so they just knew I was this guy, and I was dedicated. I showed up 7 days a week, so they assumed I didn't have a job. They knew I was sponsored, so they thought he must know somebody. But anyways, long story short, in 2013, I get a call from Stephen Tetchy. He's like, "Hey, I got a job with the UFC." Well, me and Tetchy, I talk about the Tetchy brothers in my book, and I was friends with all three of them. Paul, the younger brother, me and him were the same age, but they lived 2 streets down from us. So them and my older brother, and the 5 of us became like best friends. We're always with each other. Their dad was our baseball coach and all that stuff. So we grew up with them. I'm doing jiu-jitsu. I've been doing it for 4 years now. I'm doing jiu-jitsu and MMA. I retired from MMA in 2011. But 2013 says I got a job with the UFC as an accountant. Steven should write a book also because he was a rock star before that, and it's a wild story. But anyways, Steven he's a genius, and he makes his way up in the UFC and starts he's got a long title, but he runs UFC Fight Pass. And so during COVID, Fight to Win started doing shows again, but they couldn't have an audience, and the only place that would let them do a show was Dallas. And so they're out of Denver, and Seth, a really good friend of mine, called me and said, "Hey man, we're trying to cut costs as much as we can because we can't sell tickets. We're just on Flow Grappling, so can we stay at your house?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "This is good for me because I'm going through a divorce." And so I was like, "But here's the rules. I don't party. I don't, Team No Sleep with Fight to Win, they're known as a party group." And I was like, "This is not a frat house. This is not they're moving into my 6-bedroom, 6-bath with a pool house and a pool. And, I got 4 cars out there. I got an Aston Martin. I got a Porsche. I got all this stuff." I was like, "You don't touch shit out here. You break anything in my house, it's over," and, whatever. So he's like, "No, cool." So they abided by it, and it was good. We started doing these shows, and I was his head referee. And so I'm refereeing him. He calls me one day. He's like, "Hey, I need you to do commentary tonight." I was like, "What?" I'm like, "Dude, there's no way." I was like, I haven't even looked at the card. I don't know who's on it. I was like, as a referee, you really don't need to know. You don't care who's on the card. You just, it's, what to do. I do the rules meeting, and then it's up to the athletes after that. There's 20 fights on each card, and that's it. And so I did it, and about halfway through the first show that I did, says like, dude, you're doing commentary from now on. And then Flow Grappling had some good feedback. So I did it for all through COVID. Like it was, we were shut down for 6 or 7 months, and we did a show every week in Dallas. And I was doing commentary, after the second or third show, I was doing commentary for every show. And then in 2021, Steven called me, and now he's higher up at the UFC. And he's like, hey, I heard you're doing commentary for Flow Grappling. I was like, yeah. I was like, I've been doing it for about a year, maybe a little less, but I've done every single show. And he's like, cool, I'm going to listen tonight. I was like, all right, cool. So he listens, calls me in a couple days. He's like, hey, I heard you doing commentary. He goes, hey, work on these couple things. You're doing great. He goes, but work on these couple things, and I'll get you a gig with us. Now, when he said it, to me, that was like saying, improve your basketball game a little bit. I'll put you in the NBA. Mm-hmm. And, I was like, this is not going to happen. But I still took his advice because I treated everything I do like this business and like the promises I the promises I made myself. Somebody gives you feedback. I want you to think about it, do an evaluation. Does it really need to improve? And then improve it. And if it doesn't go against kind of what your morals or standards or values are, then improve and do it. So I did. And so I did maybe 3 or 4 more shows. He calls me, he's like, hey, come to the UFC event in Houston, plan on staying until Monday, wear a suit. And I was like, and that was the only instructions I got. And I was like, okay. So by then I had this $3,000 suit that I was like, man, I've been waiting to wear this thing. So I wore like a $3,000 custom made suit down to this thing. And, we went there, and I think Derek Lewis was the main event. And, so on Saturday we went to the UFC event, and, you really don't even sit. You kind of stand cage side because we have these passes, and Steven can go anywhere. He has all access, and so when we're with him, we're just going wherever he's going. And he's kind of introducing me to people, and he introduced me to Eric Garcia, and Eric is the promoter for Fury Fighting Championships. Didn't really think anything of it. He goes, we're going to go to Eric's show tomorrow night. That's why you're staying until Monday. And I was like, all right, cool. So we go. They're shooting the Dana White Looking for a Fight, and it was Fury Fighting Championship 46, I think. And he was like, so we go to the show. It was pretty cool. It was like a big time production. I mean, it was awesome. And so I'm looking over, and Eric comes over to me, and he's like, hey, the reason you're here is because one of my commentators is leaving. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I was like, where's he going? He's like, he got a job with ESPN. And I was like, you want me to replace a professional commentator? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay. I was like, when? And he was like, this was in May of 2021. He's like, next month, I got a show in June. You're going to sit in. And Steven goes, and we're not paying you for it. And, it's up to them after that. Your foot's in the door, but that's it. From now on, I'm going to be more critical of you than I will anybody, because just because we're friends doesn't mean I'm going to hook you up. And, I appreciate that. I was like, all right, cool. Because by then I was like, I didn't expect to make it. Right. I was like, I get to do a show. It's on UFC Fight Pass. That's cool. And originally they told me you're only going to do the prelims that are on Facebook. You're not going to get on Fight Pass without our little, we're going to do a quick evaluation of you on the prelims, and then we'll say, yeah, take him on to Fight Pass. So they did, went to Fight Pass, and we killed it. And I ended up doing color instead of play-by-play, which is what AJ did. And Todd Moore moved over to the play-by-play because that's what he wanted to do. He was doing color with Alex Morono, and AJ Hoffman, who was a professional broadcaster, was doing play-by-play. And so we did that for maybe 10 shows, and then Raheel came in and started doing play-by-play, and they gave Todd another role in there, which he didn't like as much. So Todd left and went over and did boxing commentary for some boxing. And so Fury Fighting Championship 47 was my first show, and now we're on 98. And so I've done 50 shows. I did the inaugural UFC Fight Pass Invitational at the UFC Apex. I've done 50 Fury shows, and I've done a few like amateur series shows and a few Dana White Looking for a Fight. And, I've done a few of those shows also and been able to do commentary for it. And it's just been, it's been a wild, wild existence. It's been a wild ride. And so, it used to be where when I was doing commentary for Fight to Win, you're not on TV. They just hear your voice. So I kind of became the voice of jiu-jitsu. You know, the jiu-jitsu people were like, hey, I would talk, and they say, hey, are you Blackbelt Mike? I was like, yeah. Like, how'd you know? And they're like, well, I recognize your voice. And so, you know, when you move over to Fight Pass, you're on TV, and you're doing the production. Everything looks just like the UFC's production.
Right.
And so this is the minor leagues. All these people are going to be in the UFC if they're good.
Right.
And so, yeah, we did that first show. We hit it off with great chemistry. Raheel came on. He added that, you know, professionalism to the broadcast because, you know, your play-by-play guy, John Anik, those guys, they really run the show. It's really up to them whenever as to how good the commentary is going to be. The play-by-play guys, you know, we kind of have fun with it, and it's kind of fun for us. But the hard stuff is reading the bumpers, reading the intros, doing that kind of stuff, and not stumbling and not, you know. And professional broadcasters do that. And so, yeah, we've done 50 shows now together. You know, Raheel and I and Alex have done 40-something shows together. You know, we have really good chemistry. We're really high rated in UFC Fight Pass, and we're having a blast with it. So running these businesses and doing this on the weekends, you know, I'm always busy, which is cool for me because I don't really like to sit.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, it's cool being on TV and being in Vegas and being in these places, and somebody comes up and they're like, "Hey, can I take a picture?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you know who I am?" And they're like, "Yeah, of course I know who you are." And you know, being heavily involved in ADCC and you know, knowing those guys and getting to travel the world and just grapple with world-class guys, and you know, go to the UFC PI. And you know, a couple times ago I was there, and we're training the gi, and I look over and Anthony Pettis walks on. He's got his gi on. He's like, "Hey, you want to roll?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I'm rolling with the former lightweight champion of the UFC, and he's we're both black belts, and we're rolling. We're having a really hard roll, and you know, I'm a lot older than him, but still, it's you know, it's those moments where you kind of have these moments where you're like we talked about, like I'm on a jet, I'm, you know, on this boat, and I'm not supposed to be here. You know, I'm supposed to be, you know, recidivism's huge. I'm supposed to be back in prison by now. But that's one of those moments too. You're at the UFC PI, and Dana White's right there, and Anthony Pettis is here asking if you want to roll, and Forrest Griffin's walking around, and all these people know your name, and you know, it's kind of surreal, and it's you know, it's really cool, and it's not something I take lightly. You know, I really try to do a good job at it, and you know, the goal for me is the same as the fighters. You know, I want them to call me and say, "Hey, we want you to do a fight night. We want you to do a pay-per-view. We want you to do that." And you know, the opportunity is always there because you know, people show up with no voice, people get sick, people whatever. So the opportunity is there. You know, they'll never tell you, "Hey, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you that," but you always want to be ready for the opportunity because they see you. You think they don't, but they see you no matter at what level. I've had a few viral interviews, ring interviews that have had millions of views, and we were on Jimmy Kimmel and TMZ and all this other stuff. And so, you know, I thought, man, I got 200 million views, but nobody even noticed. And then, you know, run into John Jones, and he's like, "Hey, I know you. You're the guy that interviewed Joel Bauman." And I was like,
"That's crazy.
Well, you're John Jones." He was like, yeah, I'm John Jones. I was like, "Oh, cool." And so, you know, we kind of have this cool exchange, and then he sits right next to me for the whole event, and we just kind of shoot the shit. So, you know, it's those kind of moments that are surreal that, you know, you think, and I think it back 100%. These discipline things I did every day, making my bed, you know, following these principles that I did every single day. That's why I'm getting to meet John Jones today. It's not because my friend works for the UFC or because of that, because he'd have fired me in a second if I was terrible. Right. Or he'd have fired me in a second if I even asked him for the opportunity.
Yeah.
But it's because I do all those things. That's the reason I'm sitting here with John Jones. That's the reason I get to roll with Gordon Ryan. That's the reason I get to, you know, do these things whenever I go. And it's, you know, they're accepting me as just, you know, yeah, this is the guy that's in our circle, and we're gonna be cool to him. And so, if all those things weren't true outside of that life, this life wouldn't even be possible.
What's next for Blackbelt Mike?
Man, people are telling me I need to write another book. The audiobook, I'm glad you listened to the audiobook because I don't know if I'm supposed to tell people this or not, but whatever. the studio where I read my audiobook, the guy who owns the studio is a Grammy-winning music producer, and so he put our audiobook in for nomination for a Grammy Award, and we'll find out, and it got accepted. So we'll find out they're listening to it. All the people on the committee are listening to it. We'll find out in November if it gets nominated for a Grammy, and then of course we'll find out if we're going to win one in December. And then
Wow.
The actual Grammys are in February. So
Well, congrats.
So we got nominated in 4 categories. We put in for a nomination for 4 categories, and I still don't really understand how it works, but that's outside of business. Inside of business, man, I'm just gonna keep growing my businesses at a reasonable speed. My favorite thing I'm working on right now is I've got a treehouse community that I'm building on 40 acres, and we're gonna build 12 or 16 tree houses out there on this beautiful property in these trees, and we're gonna have like these luxury bathhouses and all that stuff outside of them, and then we're building an event center on the same property that they're gonna do weddings and all kinds of stuff at. So and this is something that for me, I have partners on this, and we're gonna keep this. This is one of our investment properties that'll cash flow us every month. So this is another piece of my retirement. So that'll come up. We'll be finished with that, the first part of it, probably in January or February, and then we'll be finished with the event center by summer of next year. So pretty excited about that.
That's exciting, man.
Yeah.
I mean, this is probably one of the longer podcasts. We haven't even touched so many things.
Yeah.
What's on your mind? Do you have any questions for me? Anything you want to say?
Man, I just had I did a little video on the way over here, and people were like, I was like, hey, you got any questions? You got anything you want to cover? And there was 4 or 5 people that responded, and 3 of them had almost an identical question. It was like, what are some principles whenever you're running a business or you're starting a business or you're trying to, flex your entrepreneurial muscles? What are some 3 like ground level principles that you need to put in place to, before you decide to do that? And they're different for everybody. But for me, I kind of just wanted to answer that question and then get your 3. But I think my big 3 are learn financial literacy, learn about financial literacy and cash flow and all those things. Make sure you know about that. Make sure you know as you're scaling how much cash your company needs as you start to scale it up. Because cash flow is everybody's problem, and everybody's solution. Cash seems to fix everything in a business.
Right.
And then, the last thing is tough, but it is, I don't want to go into business, and I don't want to give anybody else advice into going into business unless there's some intrinsic value there. If you're just going into business to make money, that's one thing, and there are people that can do that. They can just be, pull away from the business. This is just a business, and I just invest in it, and maybe I do or maybe I don't have to do with the day-to-day, but I don't really care about what we're doing as a business, but I can't do that. And so I feel like all these things, it's a lot easier to have discipline. It's a lot easier to wake up in the morning. It's a lot easier to, work till midnight if you have to, if that intrinsic value is there. If it's something you love and it's something you know a lot about and it's something you spend a lot of time on and something you're really passionate about, I'm a firm believer that you can, if you're, no matter what it is, if you're really, hey, I want to open a winery or I want to open anything like that, first of all, know about a winery, know how much cash it takes to, to do all this stuff. And then you got to love wine. If you hate wine, you're like, well, yeah, but I heard it makes a lot of money. I just don't feel like that's a business you'll be successful at.
Right.
And so you'll be hiring people who love the wine, then you're going to their taste and not your own. And I just don't think it mixes well. And so, so I think if you adhere to those 3 things and just kind of, learning is first, and then, being open-minded. I think businesses fail, people fail, relationships fail because of their failure to adapt to change. And so if you cannot adapt to change, maybe that's the 4th, and it might even be the most important, is that, if you can't adapt to change, then you're just not going to make it. Your things aren't going to make it. You're going to get old. Your ideals are going to be old. Your your methods are going to be old, and people are going to pass you by, and they're just not going to use you anymore.
That's good. My 3 principles, something that my mentor taught me. It's number 1 is you have to have the right platform. The right platform includes systems, processes, the right morals, values, principles. Kind of includes what you were saying. It's like if you have to love what you do. If you don't love what you do, then you can't get up every day, even when you're tired, and go to work.
Yeah.
Because you just can't.
Yeah.
So number 1 is the right platform. Number 2 is the right mentor. I think you have to have the right mentor, someone that is where you want to be, because coming from corporate America, so my background's engineering. I went to school, got a couple engineering degrees, got my MBA, did everything like I'm supposed to, like a good boy, right?
Yeah.
Went and I work as an engineer right now at a Fortune 50 company.
Mm-hmm.
And the top guy in the building probably makes $250, $300.
Yeah.
And no disrespect, but I want to make 20 times that.
Yeah.
So I want to get mentorship from someone who's making 20 times that.
Yeah.
So having the right mentor, and then number 3 is the right environment. You're right. The association's kind of like we've talked about.
Yeah.
You have to be around the right people. If you're around 5 millionaires, what's likely you're going to be the next millionaire? If you're around 5 disciplined people, you're going to be the next disciplined. The meetings you attend, the conferences you go to, the events. We met at an event.
Yeah.
So being in those kind of like our backgrounds, right? You can meet people at a bar, or you can meet people at a conference, a business event, a fight pass, or whatever it is.
Yeah. That's actually networking.
That is back to that's real networking.
Yeah.
So that's my 3: platform, mentorship, and environment.
Yeah, all those very, very important. I want to add one thing to the mentorship.
Yeah.
Mentors get mistaken a lot for people that, you said, I want to be like this person. If your mentor is not ready to let you go because he has mentored as much as he can, and you don't want your mentor to put a ceiling on you.
Mm-hmm.
And so your mentor's like, if they're saying, no, this is as good as it gets, this is where it is. I mentor a lot of people. My expectation is that they're going to leave me and they're going to go to another mentor that is either continuing in the the field that they're in, but if they're not striving for, like you said, for better than I have, or better than, my expectation is that people I'm mentoring will pass me by one day.
Right.
I'm going to age out. I'm going to retire one day. If you're depending on me, I want you to have somebody else who has more, who has, whatever, because usually the mentors the people that you're mentoring are younger than you. So you're going to age out. You're going to do those things. Make sure that you have a mentor that's cool with you passing them up.
Yeah.
Because if they're not, you may not, and you may get even with them, and that may be fine with you. But if they're not cool with you being better than them, you probably need to get a different mentor.
I completely agree. That's a phenomenal point. Any closing thoughts or final thoughts?
No, man, I appreciate you coming on here. I love these kind of podcasts. I love talking about business. I love, of course, talking about the book. And there's so much, and I know I'm kind of scattered whenever I start talking about this, but these timelines are so crazy, and the book means a lot to me. Just because it's really, really hard to be that vulnerable, especially whenever people look at you and you're like, man, he's a tough guy, and
you're a superhero.
And he's like, he's a business guy. He's all this stuff, and it's like, surely he had a great upbringing, and he had great mentors, and that's just couldn't be further from the case, from the truth. And so, the book means a lot to me. It's done really well, and the audiobook's done well. I may write another one down the road, but I'm just not at the stage yet where I'm ready for it. I feel like I need more things to happen to actually fill a book and make it interesting. And I know it's coming. And so I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you doing stuff like this and bringing people on to, kind of help people kind of understand what it takes to get where you want to go. Because, a lot of people are selling a dream. But whenever you see people that are local, that are here, that are accessible to you, that is what, in my opinion, makes a difference. Somebody can go to a networking event and they can see both of us. Maybe we rode together. They can see us there.
Yeah.
And so they have access to people like us who genuinely want them to be better. And we're not really trying to sell you anything. We're not trying to say, come to my program and you can learn how to do this and this and this. and we're accessible and we're available, and I appreciate that.
Absolutely. I do have a gift for you, and you mentioned this gentleman in your book. You actually made a joke about it, but you talk about financial literacy, generational wealth, legacy, and there's a guy by the name of Rockefeller, and he has a legacy that I admire.
Yeah.
So he wrote a book, or he wrote a bunch of letters to his son, and
wow.
it's the 38 letters from John D. Rockefeller to his son. It talks about discipline, so many different things.
Yeah.
So each letter is based on a different principle. Talks about competition, talks about mentorship. This is a book that me and a lot of my guys are reading right now, from the top down. A book that is hard to, how do I say? There's so many values and principles that you've brought up that correlate with this, and it just resonated with me. So I think it'd be, hopefully add some value to you.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate that. You're gonna have to sign it though. You're gonna have to write in it. But yeah, I really appreciate that. And that's one thing that I had never done in my life, was read a lot. And when you're in jail, you got a lot of time, a lot of free time. So you start reading, and I'm gonna send you a book. It's called Thick Face, Black Heart, and it's one of the books in there that completely changed the way. I was very angry for the first 6 months. Read Thick Face, Black Heart. It completely changed the way I looked at the world. Completely changed the way I thought about doing business. And there's a lot of little anecdotes in there that are really, really cool and easy to remember. And that's the kind of stuff that I like in the books that I like to read, is like, things you can take nuggets from and use them every day and kind of remember them. So I really appreciate that, man. This means a lot to me.
Of course. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Black Belt Mike.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.